So Ed, tell me about your experience here in the industry, and how did that lead to you to get to virtual reality?
Oh, I don't know if we have enough time to get through that here, John, but I'll try to condense it a little bit. So I started out in the business in 1995 with Stafford Trading, working on in the equity options trading desk. I quickly moved off floor during those formative years for me, and was working on a bunch of computer systems and pricing systems that backed up and supported all the traders on the floor. For that reason, really, I'd spent only about, for someone who's been in the business for nearly 25 years, I've spent only about 4 months on the floor. And so I was always indoctrinated and looking at the business from an off-floor perspective. I continued to work at that trade begin trading off floor for myself in 1998, which I would say was early. Certainly, there was still quite a rambunctious market and quite a good trading market on the floor with the Nasdaq boom and well into 2000. So what kind of looked like a little bit of a lost opportunity for me in terms of whether it was the best time to be off floor or not, quickly turned into something that turned out to be a lot more prescient in the long run, at least for my career. So as the floor has migrated away and we went to off floor trading and electronic trading, I found myself with a good understanding about how the market worked from that perspective, and was able to capitalize on that early in my career. In 2002, I joined Rob Merrilees, who had founded Spot Trading at the time. And Spot Trading, founded in 1999, was one of the world's really first entirely off-floor trading firms. And so I was able to take some of the career experience that I had coming into it, get with a new group of people who were very dedicated and pushing forward and very early adopters of technology. Stayed at Spot for a long 16-year run, where we were, had a great run, tremendous amount of success through a bunch of different marketplaces. We wound up closing the firm down in 2018, and my career took a detour into cryptocurrency. And I worked on a Bitcoin and a brokerage project with Peak Six and Apex Clearing for about 18 months, which took me right up to the beginning of COVID. And so was then decided, okay, now what am I going to do next for my career? And had gone through a couple of different cycles, and had reunited back with Rob Merrilees, who I was partners with at Spot. And we were pretty enthused with some emerging technology on the scene, specifically virtual reality and augmented reality. So in many ways, totally tangential to anything we've ever done in our careers before. However, we saw a lot of similarities that in the VR tech market that were similar to what we saw back in the early 2000s at the advent of electronic trading. And so while the business was starting, we thought this could be one of the next big killer business applications. We decided to form Get Real, which is a company we founded last year. And we're a partner and we're an advisor to businesses and organizations, helping them imagine and leverage how they can use virtual reality, augmented reality, and other immersive technologies to dramatically improve the way they work. So we've been at it for about a year now. We've had a ton of great use cases for the technology, and we've met some amazing people along the way. We've just started to come back to some of our financial roots with one of our product offerings that we think has, potentially some big potential impacts with probably the audience that's on the call today, and certainly throughout the exchange and financial services industry.
You have a demonstration for us?
Yeah, before I start that, let me tee it up a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit about what I'm going to show.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, Get Real was formed last year, and we've really focused our business on three main areas to start. We do a lot of work in virtual collaboration and virtual space, virtual events. So think anything brought on by the pandemic really accelerated, but ways to meet that are outside of the Zoom call that we're on right now. They're using an Oculus 2 headset or some AR glasses or other VR headsets, and they're immersive. They shut out the outside world, and it creates a depth and an understanding and a perception and empathy amongst the participants that really create a different type of meeting. And so people for the last year have been leveraging this technology to find ways to meet with creative teams who are dispersed across the country. They're looking at it for ways to replace social events like conferences and different presentations, much like what you're doing here right now, John, with MWE. And so that's been a big focus of our business, to help be the connector between the technology, which is new but emerging, and some of the people that might have some unique use cases around collaborating in VR that we think we can help. Another area that we focused a bunch on is training. Probably one of the most business ready cases for virtual reality. And that's both on the job skill training side. So think heavy machinery or things that are dangerous, hard to replicate, costly to replicate, but also soft skills. So tying it back to, no one gets more training around these days with the way that society is, like the advent of D&I training and management training and difficult conversations and how to manage employees and such. That can all be done in a headset now with an entirely different experience to any of the computer-based training that people are used to using now, and has scored off the charts on retention, off the charts on employee engagement. So it's really a new frontier for how training is going to be delivered going forward in a remote, repeatable, and trackable way. The last piece is kind of why we came on and why we're here to talk today to your audience, and it's around data visualization. So to take a step back, at the trading firm, we struggled with this for a long time. We've had tons of quantitative analysts, quantitative researchers. We had every piece of hardware imaginable. We did nothing but mine data and try to find insights of how we wanted to price options across the entire universe. And that was great. But we came to a problem. And we had to try to put as much data as possible in front of our traders to make decisions. And so the way I would describe the problem is that we were bounded. The data display was bounded. So whether that be the four corners of a monitor, whether that be the page of a book or the page of a report, somehow, some way, data couldn't go on infinitely to be presented. And so there was real estate issues. That's why you saw in the early days traders with 10 monitors on their desk, and you don't even know how they can keep track of everything that's on them. Donnie, you probably remember those days as well, and sanding in the pit. So
I was just laughing to myself about the sheets people used to bring down to the trading floor.
11 by 14s, and then what if interest rates move a quarter, and then you got to get to the other sheets, and so there was a boundary problem with data. And so when we saw this product, we saw a tool last year after we started the company that basically removed the boundaries. And it was a tool called Flow Immersive, which was really specialized in the 3D data storytelling aspect of data communication. And let me back up and explain that a little bit. You can have all the analysis in the world. You can run programs. You can have quants. You can run Power BI, MATLAB, Tableau. Businesses these days are all about mining data and using that insights to drive their strategy, not just in finance, but especially in finance. The world sits on mountains of data. But when we have to go communicate that's great if a quant's talking to a quant, or a research analyst is talking to a research analyst. But most of us aren't in those businesses where we have pros talking to pros. We're in transactional businesses. We're in sales businesses. And we need to communicate the insights of that data to an audience that may have very little understanding about what they're seeing. And so what do? We spend all this money and all this time and all these resources mining these insights. And then when we go try to present them to someone to try to influence their behavior, try to get them to rebalance their portfolio, try to get them to buy our product or services, try to get them to vote for us, try to get them to adopt some sort of group medical plan of attack, we fall miserably short. We boil things down into 3 PowerPoint points. We put a stack of 80 page deck in front of people with charts and graphs. We tell them to go to page 62. We tell them to refer back to page 42. Donnie, think of any investment presentation you ever got, and someone asks a scenario question and they either haven't modeled it or it's on a different page, and now go back to page 4. You lose all reference. So when we go to communicate around this data, we fall terribly short. And Flow Immersive and what Get Real is looking to do is kind of break down those barriers for people. So it is a tool for after your data has been mined and your insights have been mined, and now it's time to communicate. And the last thing I'll say before I show a couple examples is that the need to communicate this data is becoming more and more important. Data-driven decision-making is prevalent everywhere. Data is going to solve all the great problems in the world, but not if people don't understand it. And so the same dashboards and charts that you might use when you're talking to your research analyst can't be the same tools to communicate around data that you use when you go try to sell or you go try to influence. So I'm going to pause here and just tee up a little bit of what I'm going to explain. So Get Real, we are, as I mentioned, we're a consulting firm, but we are a certified designer in this tool for Flow Immersive. So we're the only certified designer to create these presentations in the mediums of virtual reality, augmented reality, and other immersive technologies for this particular tool. So firms will contract with us, bring us on. We have a pretty extensive financial background experience, so we understand kind of the language that they're speaking, but we really help you tell the stories that you want to tell around your data. So we took, for our first example here, we took what might be in a hypothetical conversation that an RIA is having with their client about rebalancing a portfolio. And we've taken it and put it in a presentation that I'll show here to everybody. The one thing that's key to remember is here, these are incredibly rich and incredibly mind-blowing experiences in virtual reality headsets. Soon that form factor is going to move to augmented reality glasses. It's going to look just like the glasses you have on your face, John, and you're going to be able to be in a different world and see data painted wherever you walk. Where this product has really gained traction, though, is breaking down the barriers of the technological delivery of these presentations. And so they have easy ways to get into these presentations via the phone, via tablet, via PC. It can be Zoom backgrounds. They can be set as AR videos, much like Instagram filters. So they're really designed to be a frictionless way to communicate around data with anybody, regardless of what tools you're looking for. So I'm going to pause right there. I'm going to share my screen, John.
You got me to sit up and take notice here, Ed.
All right, we got you. If I get Donnie's attention, I know I'm doing something right.
That's right, because it's a small window.
So I'm sharing here, and I see that this is going to be a hypothetical market portfolio situation. Now, I notice everybody can watch on the screen share, but what I can do is I can put you into this experience, the same experience that I'm in, and you can kind of go wherever you want to using your phone, pinching, pulling, dragging, to orient yourself around the data however you want to. So I control the presentation, however you guys control where you want to look. So if people are on the line and they can do, I'm going to share this QR code. And the navigation around this is just pinch, pull, same way you'd navigate around a phone. There's some more people coming in right now. We looked at last year what was happening with COVID in the marketplace. And we said, well, let's take a look at just what the market did in general from January 2020 through, this ran through earlier this year through February 2021. And you can see wherever you go, we have a list of kind of what basic asset classes in the marketplace to show just kind of in general what everything did. And so you can kind of swim around this data. You can go underneath. If you come here along the side, you can see, well, you know, obviously in March, everything went crazy and all these markets dropped, some more than others. You can kind of get down here in the tunnel and see. And then they spent the rest of the year into the beginning of this year at various stages of recovery. Some recovered faster than others. Some didn't recover fully. So you get a sense of kind of where the market did. I'll move us forward. And we just can model a hypothetical $1 million portfolio. So here against the backdrop in gray of what the market did, here's what an individual investor's portfolio might be. So you see, well, hey, after kind of a sell-off in March, just like the rest of the market, it actually outperformed. And certainly its bounce back was much more poignant and stark than the bounce back of the rest of the market. So we can kind of dive in. So that makes me say, well, let's go into that portfolio and let's see what they're invested in. So I move that forward. And we can see, all right, now we blew that portfolio up and we can say, well, here, what kind of holdings do we have? And so I can come along this axis and say, well, it had some bond funds, it had some Amazon, it had some Apple. someone's grandma left them some Philip Morris. There's some cues, some spiders. But if you drop back, or you can kind of go where your eye takes you, there's something that's standing out here more than any other holding in the portfolio. And obviously, if you go all the way to the top, you see that, in effect, is Tesla. So they own some Tesla, up 720% throughout the year. So a great portfolio for this holder, this investor. But any advisor worth their salt is going to try to get them to rebalance. And you can tell that by, we talk about overlaying some portfolio weightings. So we come in here, we can see in the orange when we started out, Tesla, that's just 5% of the portfolio. So, fairly basic standard rule of thumb. I'm not going to let any one investor, one holding occupy more than 5%. But if we flip over to the end, we can see that 5%'s climbed up 25% of the portfolio. So this is a rebalance situation, clear and clear. And as you guys are walking through, you want to see any of these assets, if you just hover over and touch, move your cursor, you can see, I'm looking at Apple right now, but you can see what any of these values were throughout the year. So it's a full time series. Moving forward, I can put some notes in here in this presentation. We can flag this portfolio as unbalanced. We want to get a rebalance situation happening. And I can come back out here. I map a 50% retracement in Tesla, as you can see here. And this portfolio goes down $210,000. So that was the way to model in the scenario analysis of a 50% retracement. What's that mean to this portfolio? Gives back a decent amount of its return. I can move that forward, rebalance this portfolio to where Tesla's back to its 5% allocation at the end of the year, and then model the retracement, same 50% retracement, and that portfolio only loses $41,000. So it basically cuts that loss by 3/4. So I think what's important here is not necessarily did this person get too long of Tesla or did a stock run. Think about the ways that an advisor might try to communicate with an investor or a client. So if we think about the demographics that are present in the market today, when you're talking about communication around data, there's a big investor class that has grown up, probably many of them on this call here, John, has grown up comfortable using computers, very receptive to new technology, not going to be afraid of using a VR headset, not going to be afraid of using AR glasses when they come to market here in about 18 months, and certainly aren't opposed to using their phone. The business really, if you're any sort of long-term player in the business and trying to reach investors, this business is not going to be conducted for retail investors or retail, for RIAs, less so on the golf course, less so in a steakhouse. You're going to have to engage your clients as to where they live and breathe and where they spend most of their time each day. So there's a marketing aspect to this, but certainly the medium speaks to what, where that going, and that's where all the money is transferring to. So if you're an advisor, there's trillions and trillions of dollars are going to pass generationally in the next 10, 12, 15 years as baby boomers die off. This is where that money's going. And so if you're thinking about trying to engage and build your business now, this can be a pretty effective tool. In this case, I showed behavior analysis, but I could show products, I could show services, I could show other ways that I have data that supports the value proposition of my business. And I can create these types of presentations fairly easily and use them to market, to sell, to support. The key thing that, as I just demonstrated, is that through that QR code on the phone, we just got everybody in, no friction, within a minute. And so these are multiplayer experiences. They're actually written on the same game engines as people are playing video games with. And that's how people can interact with these presentations. To take it a step further, there's a tremendous opportunity to kind of capture these in short videos or AR presentations, mobile AR presentations, to help market and sell. and get your point across that way. People are very comfortable using Instagram filters. They're very comfortable using social media. And so flow and the presentations that Get Real can make certainly have a place in trying to help promote your business or promote your services or to influence people over social media and other methods. So I'm going to share another video I have here. Here was just kind of a less data driven, but more of a, I would say, financial story around the size of big tech relative to its peers. And we did this as a short 1-minute video casted out of a headset. So it's kind of as if you were in a headset. I know you're only seeing this in 2D on the screen, but you can see kind of how deep immersion is. And you can see the story that this tells in a very short visual way of how big tech has got.
This point represents $1 billion. Already an unfathomable amount of money. Now, let's use it to compare companies within the S&P. First, at $9 billion, we have Under Armour. At $12 billion, we have Gap. At $23 billion, we have Dish. At $36 billion, we have Hershey. At $47 billion, we have Walgreens. At $125 billion, we have Big Finance. At $400 billion, we have Big Retail. And finally, we have Big Tech.
We had a little fun with that. $1 billion isn't as unfathomable as it used to be, I guess. But a quick kind of visual way to show kind of relative size, relative comparison to market cap from companies. On video, we put this out on social, got a lot of engagement with it just for some of the work that we're doing with clients. But when I think about, just to kind of wrap up to the end, I got one more to show here, John, just a different way that you can use this in different types of data. As I think about use cases in finance, I think about investment advisors. I think about exchanges that have, data, mountains and mountains of data they're sitting on, in some ways trying to differentiate themselves from other exchanges through market structure, through fills, through best execution. There's volume data. There's, when I think about, institutional portfolio managers, traditional investment banking applications. I don't know if the investment banking's world ready to put on a VR headset per se, but certainly when you're talking about having an attendant QR code that goes along with a deck or a pitch, and there's a presentation that people can go through visually and see, we're into a new way to communicate, and depending on your audience, highly effective way that they're used to being communicated with. The last thing I'll say is the role that these types of presentations can play in the broader swath of, I'll call it financial journalism or thought leadership. So think of your blog posts or your regular thought leaders at all these different investment companies and the way that they want to show that they have a command on interest rates or inflation or macroeconomic different events that happen, crazy market events like GameStop, for instance, back at the beginning of the year. People are craving insight when these events happen, or they're craving insight when the market reacts to some of these macro events. But frankly, the topics can be pretty droll, and some of those articles can be pretty boring, to be honest with you. And the dashboards or the simple charts they put up can be confusing or hard to read. Think of like all this communication, this written word through thought leadership, or trying to communicate around market analysis with an attendant code that has a QR code that you could scan, and you could follow along this presentation in 3D. And not only hear the words or read the words yourself, but see the data as they're explaining it while you're in the conference call or while you're hearing the podcast. Just some tremendous opportunities to combine different mediums of communication, but it all boils down to, in closing, how we communicate around data. And so we're super excited about the product. It's kind of tied through. We've been looking for the solution since the mid-teens at the trading firm when we had that border problem. And I got to tell you, we decided the technology wasn't there, and we just started cramming more stuff on spreadsheets and more stuff on monitors to the lowest font possible. So when Rob and I saw this product last year, right away it stuck in our head. And so we're out there trying to talk to various different peoples, all sorts of use cases, clearing firms, exchanges, crypto. All this stuff is very on brand and on market for them to try to communicate around their data. So in the closing moments, and I'll leave some time for questions, but I wanted to show one last thing. So one last example, if I may. I'm going to bring it up. 2020 was an amazing year for data analysis and data visualization, because we had an election and we had COVID. And so the amount of work that people did around trying to understand the numbers behind the election and the numbers, everyone became an amateur epidemiologist to try to understand COVID. So to go back to the election, this is one. Here's a presentation I'm going to show that used Twitter data. So now we're not talking about stock prices or charts or interest rate returns, time series. We're talking about tweets and we're talking about sentiment. So really an example of exception reporting, but it's a one-step presentation that anybody can get into. It really needs no explanation from the presenter, which is nice. Multiplayer, people can go in here and spend an hour in here and try to see what they can mine out of this data. I'm going to bring the axis this way, but you can float around and manipulate this however you want. Just the same pinch pull motion. I'm looking at every tweet from Donald Trump since he was elected in 2016 through October of 21, right before the election, laid out on a field. And so what can I discern from this? So it's obviously a big data solution here. On the height axis, it's number of likes. So as they get higher and more green as opposed to purple, those are the more popular tweets. On the depth axis here, as I swing down here, it's time of day. So in many places, you could see where Trump slept, when he slept, or when he didn't sleep, for that matter. No political leaning on this whatsoever, too. I want to just qualify. This is just the data. I'm not going to, no qualifications one way or the other. And so you can just start exploring this data. So when I overload and overlay and I click, I can see what the tweet was, how many likes it was, and the date. And so I've seen people get lost in this for an hour, reliving this entire term. A couple things you can see just as you're looking through this. One, you can see where are these tweets relative to the rest of them. Two, you can see when he sleeps. Three, if I kind of pull back from the side a little bit, look at the instances of these high green marks. He's tweeting a lot at the beginning, and he's got some pretty popular ones, early on in the term. But look what happens when we get the last 8 months, the last 10 months. It's a fire hose. And so obviously we've got COVID. Obviously we're entering into election season. This is not something necessarily that's probably not surprising anyone, but to see this kind of story told in data, to me, is just an amazing kind of use case for the tool around how would you see a lot of exception analysis, look at all your trades for the day, evaluate them on 10 different risk characteristics in 3D, and just go and look at the outliers, right? That's all risk manager would care. That's all exchange compliance would care. Obviously, you got to ask the question, what was the most popular tweet? There it is. Something for both sides of the aisle, how you want to interpret that. But when he gets COVID, a lot of likes. So kind of a fun one here too, but I think shows a pretty good analysis of how different types of data sets can be used. And certainly not just kind of stock chart type data, which is very effective, and Flo does a great job, but also kind of other sort of sentiment data sets that can tell a story.
And not a person in the office did not say that was very cool.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Ed. From your option trading perspective, have you guys taken any option data sets and looked at them and
Yep,
seen
we
anything?
have. So I'm going to put our YouTube site up just in the chat, John.
Okay.
In a moment here. We've done an SPX versus VIX data analysis to try to kind of help understand, probably more geared towards retail investors, but understand that inverse relationship. We've done some index components and their parts. So like, components versus overall index performance to try to break down index performance by sector, by subsector. We've got a whole bunch of other stuff up there too in terms of other flows we've done. We've done some crypto flows as well, presentations to talk about the performance of Bitcoin relative to altcoins, which is pretty interesting with some good animations in that. So there's probably about 7 or 8 listed on our YouTube site that people can go to. But when you think about options, like nothing's better to talk about data. It's complex. People get afraid of it. They don't understand it. They really needs to be visualized, to be seen. It can't just be lectured to. And yet people manage, Donnie, you know this, people managing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are afraid to write calls on that portfolio or sell puts on that portfolio or trade put spreads that are protected ways to increase return or buy right their index because they don't understand it and there's career risk. And so just think about ways, and certainly CBOE and Options Institute and OCC have got tons of education initiatives around getting people to use options at the retail level, which has been super successful given the volume surge. But on the institutional side, even like there's just so much money, potential users of the product to be unlocked. I'm sure you see that in the futures too, as well, in terms of ways that people can use the product. So,
Donnie, did you have any thoughts on the VR and how you might be able to utilize that?
So it's funny here, John. I had a couple of the guys in the office going over the railing, taking a picture of the code so they could get into it. We're terribly impressed. I think some of our engagement prospects with our community members, I think we could take a good look at that and make some really nice presentations. And also, well, as a startup, Ed, as you know, everybody's out there trying to raise capital in one way, shape, or form or another.
absolutely.
And, my mind kept on racing about how what's cooler that looks than some of the PowerPoints and stuff that we've put together in the past. And you're talking about glasses and goggles. Christ, you don't even need them.
No, right. So the one thing, so these experiences are amazing in goggles. And again, these AR glasses, you got Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Apple spending billions, in many cases working with each other, which doesn't happen in other areas of business, to put these AR glasses out into the market. Google Glass failed miserably 7 years ago. The world wasn't ready for it. It's now, and they're making huge bets on, the eyeballs in terms of how they want, what they want to control next. It's a little dystopian if you think about it, but with that amount of investment, surely we're going to morph to where we have a pair of Ray-Bans in our pocket that are connected to a 5G phone, and we're able to kind of at any point we want, just like you see in the movies, we're going to be able to go through data sets, we're going to be able to see maps, watch TV, have meetings. But the problem is the way that
Amazon could watch where you're going as well.
And you can see outside, see your dog running in the yard. The key thing is like this type of technology, you don't have to wait for mass adoption. Like we can get you in now. And look at Instagram, look at Instagram filters, look at TikTok, millions and millions and millions of users leveraging those platforms. And this is tailor-made for it. Some people don't necessarily equate them as business platforms. When you're talking about driving engagement and engagement around products, nothing's more hot right now than retail investing. You're really meeting people at a medium and a platform that they are super comfortable with. If this was my father, God love him, and you're trying to get a shot at his portfolio, not the tool for it. He's fine playing golf once a year and checking in on his portfolio, and I love him for it. But there's just a new wave out there, and there's new tools that people are using. And so in terms of driving engagement and driving understanding about a message, very effective. Hundreds of thousands of TikTok views, waiting lists on users for enterprise software licenses. So it's pretty exciting time, and we're excited to kind of be in the middle of it and bring that to people with some of our financial expertise.